Very warm welcome to the session. What's the next game changer in future connectivity? Organized by Lithuanian Communications Regulator. My name is Jūratė Šovienė, and together with my colleague Darius Kuliešius, we will be hosting this session. Recently, I read Walter Isaacson's book, Elon Musk. It's a fascinating story about a modern-day genius. One of Musk's teenage dreams to make humans a multiplanetary species and send them to Mars has revolutionized the whole space industry. To achieve this, the technology of rockets needed radical improvements. Musk realized that for his grand idea to be sustainable, he had to start with small rockets that could launch private and government satellites. He focused on one key metric: the cost of getting each pound of payload into orbit. That guided his obsession with increasing the thrust of the engines, reducing the mass of the rockets, and making them reusable. In less than a decade, we have reusable rockets that are launching satellites into orbit, ensuring connectivity. It's both inspiring and incredible when someone has a big dream that drives progress and turns the impossible into reality. In a short span of years, we are witnessing the emergence of new satellite companies, the global rollout of 5G technology, a significant expansion of the Internet of Things, and the development of converged mobile and satellite networks. Advancements in artificial intelligence are occurring at an unprecedented rate. 6G is promising to revolutionize connectivity and catalyze the next wave of technological innovations across various sectors. At the same time, on the ground, in a small village near the Belarusian border, there lives an elderly lady without a reliable internet access. Sometimes, when she manages to connect, digital scammers are ready to deceive her. In Lithuania, 85% of households have at least 100 megabits per second fixed on mobile broadband connectivity. Fiber coverage has been steadily increasing over the years. However, recent growth has stalled at 78% overall and 41% in rural areas. The adoption of gigabit networks is on the rise, although slow. These numbers show that while connectivity in Lithuania is quite good, it's still insufficient for some, like the elderly lady. She needs to register with a doctor, obtain electronic prescriptions, pay utilities, buy and return goods, stay in touch with distant relatives, read books, watch movies, express her opinion on social media, and receive timely notifications about emergencies and disasters. It doesn't seem like much, but due to poor connectivity or radio interferences or poor digital skills, she doesn't even use the services we are all used to. A sustainable society is one that cares for its most vulnerable members. Future connectivity is meaningful connectivity. To get there, we need to ensure an encouraging regulatory environment, strong digital skills, and reliable infrastructure. Infrastructure that would ensure safe, resilient, high-quality digital services for every resident, no matter where they live or visit. Infrastructure that would support our government in ensuring national security during emergencies and disasters. Infrastructure that would enable businesses to innovate, increase productivity, and compete in global markets. Only this kind of infrastructure can meet the diverse needs of our society. So what needs to be done? Will the next game changer in future connectivity improve the situation of the elderly lady? Or will we reach Mars first? Ladies and gentlemen, we are lucky. Today we will get the answers. The agenda for the session features a number of distinguished speakers, experts from international organizations, and leaders from the satellite, space, and telecommunication industries. Thank you. And with that, I give the floor to my colleague, Darius Kuliešius.
Tomas Lamanauskas, Deputy Secretary General of International Telecommunication Union. ITU leads efforts for inclusive digital transformation in line with sustainable development. Thomas, welcome at home. And please share your thoughts on the panel topic.
Thank you very much, Darius, and thank you very much, Jūrate, for having me here. It is indeed being at home, so many ways, being here in Lithuania and Vilnius, but also being in the event organized by Lithuanian Communications Regulatory Authority, where I actually spent the formational years of my career. And so great to see what you guys have done with this event, so bringing so many people from at least Europe, but also around the world here. You know, also this amazing space here. And for those who are first time in Vilnius, you would know to getting that type of weather here is also not very easy feat as well. So enjoy. So but hopefully you'll enjoy the discussions inside the rooms as well. So indeed, today we're starting, it's very great to start this EuroDIG, you know, from something very foundational. You know, before we talk about artificial intelligence and misinformation, disinformation, to think about, and you know, all these great applications of health and agriculture and everything like that, to think what is the foundational layer that brings us all those digital services. And this foundational layer is connectivity. And indeed, we need to speak a little bit what makes that foundational layer work. And a lot of times when we think about connectivity, we think about this last link between the, you know, that comes to the user. When we think about this elderly lady, we think about 5G. Does she have 5G, 4G? Does she have Wi-Fi at home? You know, can she connect to this? However, connectivity goes beyond those last 100 meters or even 1 kilometer. And it's actually a mesh or actually complex global infrastructure that brings together submarine, fiber, terrestrial fiber cable, satellites, towers, and other wireless infrastructure, internet exchange points, and all of that infrastructure needs to seamlessly integrate to make the connectivity work. So today, therefore, I started in the beginning to talk about what I said to you at the boring parts of it. You know. So not, again, futuristic parts of 6G and other things, but actually, what do we need actually to make connectivity work? And actually, we see sometimes when we talk about fast-paced technological environment, forget that some of the foundational layers, they do change, but not at that fast-paced. And we really need to make them work for these exciting pieces to work as well. So some of the things I'll talk to you about is what when we think about ITU, what are the key elements to make connectivity work, what do we think about? First is no surprise, still digital divide. And we still, you know, even if that little lady in Lithuania still doesn't have a connectivity, think about people in far-flung places around the world, in the Pacific Islands, in remote rural areas, in Africa, in all other places where it's very difficult to get that connectivity to everyone. And indeed, 2.6 billion people are still connected. And we have a huge disparity. We have around 90% of people connected in high-income countries, and I hope Lithuania already qualifies like one. And then we have regretfully less than 30% of people connected in low-income countries. The same with the coverage. In actually high-income countries, we have around 50% of people covered by 5G, whereas the service is nearly absent in the low-income countries. And actually, when you look at the quality of service indicators as well, low-income countries, you know, fare twice worse than high-income countries along the quality of service measures as well. So when we talk about meaningful connectivity, it's important. Also, moreover, it's not only about, again, that last mile that brings us connectivity to the people. It's also about foundational infrastructure, for example, data centers. And here, developed countries host around 80% colocation data centers, with one country in the world hosting nearly 40% of them. So we can see a really huge divide there. Again, to make it work, first of all, we need investments. We actually need nearly $1 trillion of US dollars to invest to bridge the connectivity gap as per our most recent assessment. And we need to bridge it. So for here in ITU, we just launched, together with Brazilian G20 presidency and 6 development finance institutions, which is African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank /FC, EBRD, and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the new initiative called Digital Infrastructure Investment Initiative that really works, through which we'll work to galvanize private sector investments in the connectivity everywhere and make sure that public sector investments, they don't crowd out that private sector investments, but support that. Second thing we're thinking about is resiliency, because that connectivity needs to be stable, needs to be resilient. In that context, and sorry for SAS friends here, submarine cables are essential, So because 99% of all connectivity, including from satellites now, is international connectivity is carried over the submarine cables. And it's carried around, not that big number, when you think about that, there's 500 submarine cables around the world. Of course, it's quite a bit in distance, 1.4 kilometers crossing the sea floor. Yet those cables is infrastructure, which can be pretty vulnerable infrastructure and is vulnerable to miscaps. Recent disruptions of East Africa, West African coast, Red Sea highlights our really high dependence on those cables. Really about 150 falls occur annually, and most of those falls, funny enough, are accidental, and not because of some malicious attack or some impact, but because of fishing, anchoring, natural phenomena like underwater earthquakes, or just system failures. So we need to make sure that we enhance protection and we do better to protecting those cables. And this includes also robust legal and regulatory frameworks and well-functioning market for related services, including, for example, submarine cable ships and continued investment in resilience and diverse cable systems. And we don't need to look far. Even here in the Baltic Sea, we already had some issues to resolve as well in that regard. So again, we strengthened our recently collaboration with the International Cable Protection Committee, which is an industry-led body to protect submarine cables. We had a recent dedicated session at the WSIS Forum, and the Nigerian Minister for Digital invited us all in Abuja Summit, which we'll be organizing later this year to really look in the further steps in that direction as well. Again, just a reminder, it's not just submarine cables at risk. It's also different other infrastructure. For example, natural disasters, which in Lithuania we don't fear so many, but we are pretty lucky in that regard, increased fivefold over the last 50 years, and which also threatens digital infrastructure around. We also have conflicts and cybersecurity breaches, which also pose significant risks. And meanwhile, also digital infrastructure is regretfully increasingly targeted in raging wars and conflicts, including in Ukraine just next door. Third thing we think, increasingly, we'll come to satellite connectivity. We do think about satellite connectivity, which is really seeing a huge revival, especially with the now new developments in low Earth orbit and middle Earth orbit satellites. And I think that's where Eurate also covered a little bit. Currently, we have around 9,000 satellites orbiting the Earth, 9,000 functioning satellites. I'll mention in a minute about the other ones. But this growing sector is also raising pressing questions about space access, or equitable access to space for different companies and countries, about spectrum coordination, space traffic management, space debris, and market access rule. Just taking space debris, which is all that garbage that's floating into space, literally, something like that. So currently, there are around 35,000 objects which are regularly tracked, and at least 1 million debris objects between 1 to 10 centimeter estimated to be in orbit. An impact of any of those pieces, including that 1 centimeter piece that goes in a very extraordinary speed, can make the satellite interoperable. So there is a need for that work now. So we are already working in different areas in that regard. So ITU Council, which was completed last Friday, confirmed their agenda for the World Radio Communications Conference 2027, which is a global conference that works on a radio spectrum distribution and regulation of satellite orbits, and which will guide our agenda to preparing for this conference. So indeed, this agenda focuses heavily on space resources, actually more than 4/5, around 80% of agenda items of World Radio Conference, or WRC27 for short, are space-related. It's also part of the global agenda. The draft pact for the future, which will be big part of the agreement at the Summit of the Future later this year in September in New York, where the heads of state and governments are expected to come together and agree on our future regulation, also includes space frameworks as an important topic, and encourages collaboration between important UN agencies, including UNOSA, United Nations Agency for Outer Space Affairs, with their Committee for Peaceful Users of Space, as well as ITU and others. Space economy will also be a key topic of the coming Global Symposium for Regulators. It's taking place early in July in Uganda, and hope the Lithuanian regulator will attend there as well. Fourth, which is related to that, is blurring lines between satellite and mobile connectivity, especially the so-called direct-to-device market. I think it's always difficult to describe that because everything is a device that receives that. But when we talk about direct-to-device, we're talking about satellite to that device. So, and we already have the good applications in emerging communications. Some of you who will see these type of devices, when you don't have connectivity, you'll see small satellite pictogram on the corner of your satellite. That's Apple working with EchoStar and providing you Apple working with Globalstar, providing you the ability to communicate when there is no connectivity in emergency situations, no terrestrial connectivity, I should say. So again, the WC27 will consider possible new allocations for direct connectivity between space stations and mobile user equipment to complement mobile terrestrial network. And again, when we see also the broader collaboration with a landmark agreement between Global Satellite Operator Association and GSMA, which is Mobile Operator Association, to work in that regard, which is, for those who are in this industry, you'll see is pretty landmark, because usually mobile operators and satellite operators don't really like to sit in one room, especially agreeing on the spectrum. Fifth is sustainability, and I see that Darius is showing me the time, so I'll probably will have to take short on questions. Sorry for that. So sustainability. So with digital technologies are helping the sector around other sectors to fight the climate crisis, we need to realize our own responsibilities as well. And here we still have to work. Our industry emits around 1.7% of greenhouse gas emissions. We generated around 62 billion kilograms of e-waste, and only 22% of that is recycled. And this is really the challenge that we need to meet. So on a positive note, our sector really buys around 60% of renewable energy pre-purchase, constitutes around 60% of renewable energy pre-purchase agreements around the world, which again shows responsibility. And we're working a lot to make sure that our responsibilities are met. ITU has a suite of standards on sustainability emissions reduction. We work on e-waste around the world, and 6G vision, that's the only my mention of 6G, has sustainability included as design requirements in the technology development. And we are also mobilizing industry through Green Digital Action, with the commitments taken at COP28. And finally, our council last week just adopted a resolution calling us to raise our ambition in this regard. So looking ahead, and that's where I'll come to the moon, actually not all the way to the moon, just to the, I'll come to the Mars, but that's kind of where now I disclose where I'm going, so not all the way to the Mars, just to the moon. When we talk about connectivity anywhere, indeed we're already talking about connectivity there. Again, just for your information, WC27 agenda already includes possible new allocations for communications on the lunar surface and between lunar orbit and the lunar surface. Again, expanding our connectivity missions beyond the Earth. So we already 2027 discuss how to coordinate that. So that's kind of some of the elements we talked to. So as technologies evolve, we need to continue thinking about the foundational elements of the connectivity to make sure that we deliver meaningful, resilient connectivity to everyone, everywhere. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Sorry, Darius.
I think we should keep, and it's time for a question. Yes, please.
So on space regulation, if we were to shift some of the load of connectivity into satellite communications, are there any protocols or measures in place for natural disasters such as solar storms?
So your question has like 3 different topics in one, but I'll unpack it a little bit. So first of all, solar storms is a very important piece. It's for everyone who knows. We actually had a couple of months ago one, which we nearly missed, but it already impacted a little bit of our electricity grid, I think, especially in North America. So solar storms is this effect when sun emits the flares and an energy that can impact our electromagnetic fields. Indeed, so this is one of those so-called black swan events, that's never really impacted us, but could have impacted us a lot. So ITU is already working on that. We last World Radio Communications Conference allocated spectrum and made decisions on space weather monitoring, so ensure that we can monitor that better. So that's as one piece there. So we're starting at least with the monitoring, but indeed we're starting to talk with the key stakeholders also a little bit more game, let's say, scenario planning and game planning to make sure that we as a let's say world are prepared for that. For me, solar storm is like pandemic for the telecoms, so it's the same thing that no one thinks it will happen until one day it does, but indeed on the other things, for example, when we talk about emergency communications otherwise, because of course solar storms can knock off telecommunications, but telecommunications are very important in disasters, and that's where we see satellites having huge potential, especially for the early warnings and disaster management at this stage. So imagine if far-flung Ireland gets the submarine cable disconnected, and that's not very unlikely. We had Tonga a couple of years ago, fully disconnected from the world because of the submarine cable disruption. And at the moment, if they don't have actual satellite phones, they cannot communicate. Now, if they have increasingly have normal phones, they actually can switch over. So for now, communication is pretty limited. Even is now starting to test more and more. Quite a few players have that. But we see that a very rapid technological development, which we hope to in the next few years to pick up, from just a more emergency communications, messages-based, narrowband, to really full-fledged that. We're very happy that you saw Global Satellite Operators Association pledge to us as part of Green Digital Action to work on early warning systems through the direct-to-device technologies. So they will deliver that, and we're looking forward to that. The only pieces here, and also making sure, I don't think, at least from it will ever be, at least for foreseeable future, replacement for terrestrial technology, for many reasons that would warrant a much longer answer. I see that as more, at least for this stage, as a complementary of terrestrial technology, where you need to resolve coverage gaps and supplement that. And that's how the industry sees that as well, by the way.
Okay, so thank you very much, Thomas. Once again, Ms. Natalia Vicente. She is Vice President of Public Affairs at the Global Satellite Operators Association, where she works closely with member companies to drive forward high-level advocacy for the satellite communication sector. Together with Natalie, we will continue discussion on global perspective, bringing divides. What's next in satellite connectivity? The future of convergence. Ms. Natalia.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we hear you well. Nice to see you. Warm welcome from Vilnius. We hear you.
It's a pleasure here.
Yeah, good.
I will say it's not a pleasure not to be there, actually. But I'm very happy that I can address you all today with this conversation. And I think Thomas has set up the scene in a very nice way. Very thankful to him. I think I need to share my slides, so I'm going to try to do so smoothly. There. Can you see my screen? I'm assuming it's a yes.
Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. And as you mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs of GSOA, the Global Satellite Association. It's a very interesting and an honor to be here at the EuroDIG opening day. And I think proof of the importance of satellite is that we are opening with this topic this year. Not only because of the innovation that is happening, but how much is impacting the whole ecosystem of telecommunications and how much the collaboration between the technologies is relevant in this matter. Just to give an overview for those that are maybe not very familiar with our association, we are the association that represents the whole industry of satellite. We are led by the CEOs of many of those companies, and we have around members that goes from LEO, MEO, GEOs, and launchers and manufacturers and so on. This is just an overview of our membership. I think today I'm going to just try to share with you a little bit of a holistic view of the satellite industry and where we are today and why all of this is, I think, happening. Just giving a few numbers, we have evolved a lot in what connectivity means, and we have clearly advanced very much, I think, due to the joint effort of the different industries, but also the public sector and definitely ITU and the role that they are playing. However, we still have connectivity in many places, and we have 2.6 billion unconnected. And when we come to talk about IoT and the benefits of IoT, we clearly see a lack in 80% of the world, while at 20%, let's say, benefits from this Internet of Things or connecting the environment itself. So indeed, what is the role of satellite in all of this? I think it's important to understand, and a study that was conducted last year, and with the data that we have, that by 2030, the global economic benefits from SATCOM will exceed $250 billion, but also that more than 500 million people will connect via SATCOM. That means twice as much as today. So indeed, what we are seeing is that there's different capabilities and different qualities of the technologies that can support bridging this digital divide that definitely has an impact in other divides. And so what are the qualities that make satellite so special? And I would say, well, there's coverage, there's reliability, and there's resilience. And those are definitely some of the capacities that satellite bring to the table. So during the last decade, especially, we have seen a huge innovation from the satellite industry in the different orbits and in the different ways of conducting business. I don't think we can talk business as usual anymore, because I think we are taking really a leap into innovation. And this has an impact everywhere, but for sure, and not only, but including rural and remote areas or areas that are underserved or unserved. We live in a moment where connectivity has become, and the demand has grown. We have become increasingly dependent on connectivity, and this means that we are becoming also increasingly dependent on space. So it is essential to recognize the transformative power of satellite technology and how it enables a more inclusive, connected, and digitally advanced society. Today, GSOA members are innovating in space in the different levels, as I said, in the ground, enabling much higher throughput speeds and leveraging the unique advantages. But also, we are very conscious about the fact that no one technology can fit all the problems. And that's why I think we are in a very interesting moment of a mix of technologies with a truly meaning of that. This will allow us to precisely reduce cost and collectively deliver higher resilience and greater access for a much larger number of users around the world. So if we look at that, there is some work that is taking place in 3GPP specifically, in which we have seen how before 4G, because collaboration between satellite and terrestrial networks is not new. There has been work done together for a long time. But before 4G, there was a collaboration. And then when it became with 5G, we started to integrate the concept of satellite in these standards directly. And now looking at 6G and beyond, we are looking at it as more of a unification. So in 3GPP, in release 17, there was a milestone in the sense of, okay, we start integrating this part of the equation, and looking forward to the future, we start thinking about it from the beginning and pulling the strengths of the different technologies from the beginning. So while 5G optimizes terrestrial networks designed to allow the integration of satellite for coverage and availability extension, 6G will optimize this network design, implementation, and operation, considering the characteristics of both terrestrial and satellite communications. So by building on the integration of these non-terrestrial networks into 5G, and 6G will leverage the biggest advantages of satellite communication and sensing systems. So we will have different types of 6G devices that will be able to access satellite-based networks with service capabilities suitable for their specific use cases. So the use of satellite systems can help accelerate 6G deployment by encouraging terrestrial telecom operators to use satellite communications. And countries can reduce this way the time lag for the adoption of new technologies between urban and rural populations. This means that they can also begin to enjoy the advantages of a connected population, and the economies will benefit from this and avoid creating an even bigger divide and meet the development goals far sooner than expected. So with the work that is currently going under 6G, it is critical that governments begin to consider the wide range of technologies. For 6G to be socially and economically inclusive, governments and regulators will have to ensure their policies and regulations are also technologically inclusive, so that each technology can play its role in the 6G ecosystem or any future ecosystem. The building blocks for satellite terrestrial integration have been put in place with 5G. And 6G is building on this to deliver the ubiquity, continuity, scalability, and resilience that we're all looking for. So in order for a truly integrated 6G to become a reality, the existing spectrum used by satellite systems must be secure, as well as allowing or providing the access to more spectrum when needed. So what does it mean, all these advancements of the technology inclusion and the 6G or the 5G and so on? One of the mentioning that I also already Thomas has mentioned is the direct to device. So we definitely think that all this integration of technologies has an effect on direct to device as a whole concept that can be either IoT or direct to device as a handset. It is an exciting time, I think, for everyone that uses a mobile phone or is very aware of connectivity to think about the possibilities that this can bring, not only for current users, but also for many examples and use cases that we think a little bit less about sometimes, but it has a big implication in agriculture systems. It has an implication on the use of the natural resources and how can we better use them through IoT. So to allow to have these IoT services and the D2D services, we need to, for them to reach their potential, we need to ensure that there is a regulatory framework that enables competition, that we definitely have globally harmonized spectrum, that we foster global and open standards, and that we have a transparent and rational licensing regime. Satellite D2D is and will continue to contribute to bridging digital divides while improving safety of life and opening new horizons for connectivity everywhere. The result is bringing meaningful connectivity to consumers, increased digitalization of services for governments, new business opportunities for enterprises. And definitely there will be different models, and there's different models using a certain spectrum or another spectrum, and there is still a lot of work happening in all this innovation, and I think we need to be open and precisely allowing that environment for the innovation to continue happening. So in conclusion of what do we need for D2D to services to be affordable is that we need to continue working in the 3GPP defined NTN standards, coupled with a regulatory regime that is transparent, that safeguards existing spectrum, and that enables access to additional harmonized spectrum at a worldwide level. So this brings me to the next point that I think it's very important, and precisely is the collaboration. I think something that has increasingly changed during the last few years is the amount of collaboration that exists from both public and private sectors, and also within private sectors. Thomas already mentioned GSMA and GSOA signed a memorandum of understanding to work towards the success of this new innovation, this new integration of technologies. And indeed, we also signed an MOU with ESA, with the European Space Agency, with the same objective of bringing this reality of a network of networks and working together for the same goal, that is connecting everyone and connecting everything. So just as I'm mentioning, and this is not promotion, but the role of the NTN standards in 3GPP was recognized in March as one of the most innovative technologies of the year. And I think this is again proof of where are we heading and how important technology is. And
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Natalia, for your presentation. It's time for question. And do we have an audience? Yes, yes, please, your question.
Question related to the connectivity. We're talking about covering non-served areas everywhere. So how about the fees? Because price for satellite service is quite high right now for regular end users in developing countries. So what's position? Do you have any plans how to make these prices more or less affordable for this audience or for the society? Thanks.
Natalia, question about the trends of pricing satellite services. Could you shortly answer?
Definitely. So I think it is seen as a trend also that the prices of satellite capacity and the prices per megahertz has been dropping. Also, I think also the integration of the technologies will help precisely that, because it will make a more efficient use of the networks. But also, I think it is important that we focus on the framework that we are putting the ecosystem in, so that we can all work together into dropping those prices and not increasing the burden of certain parts or not increasing the burden into the private sector that in many cases can be passed to the consumers.
Okay, I would like to ask you as well, you mentioned main factors for better cooperation and integration between satellite and terrestrial networks, and it was regulatory environment, licensing. Could you describe or highlight maybe a couple of main factors from the perspective of operators between satellite and terrestrial? What will be the main factors for better integration?
So I think the main factors for better integration when it comes to the regulatory part is that we really need to focus on contemplating or fostering this collaboration, for example, between the industries. I know that the sandbox and ways of trying to make this happen in a more pilot base or experimenting base. It is important, I think, and I mentioned the licensing regime. We need to think about how to make these licensing regimes transparent and streamlined, and that again, it's not creating more of a burden, but it's more facilitating the services that satellites can provide. And in terms of the integration, I think it is very relevant to have more people involved on all the 3GPP's ecosystem, so that we can all contribute to this integration and in a more smoothly and future-looking way.
Okay, so Natalia, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being with us during this session. My pleasure to introduce Mr. Cecile Emile, the Director of Regulatory Affairs at CES, a global leader in satellite communications. Cecile oversees market access, policy, and spectrum advocacy in Europe, Africa, and Middle East. Cecile will present EU ambitions and CES role in governmental connectivity programs. Cecile, welcome on the stage. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Darius, and welcome to everyone. I'm very glad, and I would like to thank again RT for this invitation to Vilnius. I think about the territory covered by Thomas in his presentation before. That was extremely wide, and also Natalia mentioned many different things which are dear to our hearts in SES. My company, for those who don't know, it's called CES, but in fact it's SES. It used to be Société Européenne des Satellites. It's a company born here nearly 40 years ago. When I say here, I'm talking about Europe, the European Union. We are headquartered in Luxembourg. We started as, a regional satellite company, delivering connectivity for digital television and high-definition television. And we still do that very much. We connect today nearly 400 million people in the world for television, right? And in Europe only, it's about 150 million. So it's still something very important, television. But we have developed our activities, and now not only are we global as a player, but we also do a lot of connectivity, which used to be we used to say telecommunications, but it's two-way connectivity. Our belief, and I would like to here bring a different perspective from what we heard from the previous speakers, is actually to rely on two orbital constellations. We operate geostationary satellites, the well-known big birds which fly very high at 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. And we also operate a medium Earth orbit constellation satellites called O3b. O3b used to mean all the 3 billion, to connect the other 3 billion who are not connected. We heard from Thomas that they are a bit less now. And actually it's true that we are getting the train lower, but I mean, there's still a lot to do to connect everyone. So we combine the two, and our game changer, our belief in SES is that we need to rely on a combination of several constellations to best address the needs of our customers. So we don't do any LEO at the moment. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in it. LEO is an excellent technology, but it's more complicated to operate. You need a lot of satellites. And what is less known, you need a lot of antennas on the ground, what are called gateways. You need a big infrastructure on the ground. So LEO constellations is complicated. So we have chosen a combination of GEO and MEO. And let me give you an example of what we do with this constellation specifically for European programs. For those who are not familiar with this, EUSPA is the agency, the European agency responsible for the space program. They operate many different programs, and some of them are well known to you, I'm sure. It was established in 2021 with a regulation on space. And we as SES actually are operating and are involved in many of these different programs. So let me go through some of them and tell you in a bit of in a few words, how we contribute to this. EGNOS is one example. It's a very particular example. EGNOS is actually the system which enables the GPS and also Galileo to be more precise, to be better. And we've done that for many years. So we actually operate 2 geostationary satellites to augment the signal and make it possible for GPS to be more specific for aircrafts when landing, or the maritime ships, or, other needs where, the quality of the signal needs to be better. So it's really a navigation service. It's very specific, and it's different from what we do for Galileo, because we also serve Galileo. There we, as SES, we do not do navigation here. We're doing communication. We are taking all the data which goes through the Galileo data dissemination network, right? And we connect the control centers located in Europe to the remote sites located around the world. In fact, you have to think that beyond being a navigation system, Galileo is a source of data, an enormous source of data, what is called big data in space. How do you manage this? Precisely this is what we do with our geostationary satellites. So you see here, this is geostationary. In fact, geostationary is very good to do these kind of things. Why? Because it's very wide coverage. You only need 3 geostationary satellites to cover the entire Earth. You also provide connectivity between continents, right? Very easily. If you use the right radio spectrum, and I don't want to get into the details here, but if you use C-band radio spectrum, you actually connect Europe with Americas with 1 satellite. And no need to go up and down the Earth. 1 up is enough. This is something extremely important. For the governmental services, they need to be able to rely on something which is simple and quick. And that's exactly what we can do with geostationary satellites using C-band. GovSatcom is another very important program, and actually it's just starting now. But we in SES have already initiated and put in place a platform also based on geostationary satellites for now, to provide the various, criteria and objectives which are listed at the bottom. The high availability, the resiliency, the security, the flexibility, but also the independence. How do you make sure that we don't depend on technology that is non-European? We have a request from the European Commission to do that with European technology, our systems. So we are applying, we want to actually be part of the GovSatcom Hub initiative, which is going to deploy the infrastructure that is on Earth. So think always that when you talk about satellite, you also have an infrastructure on Earth. When you think about geostationary satellite, the infrastructure on Earth is very simple. So that makes it very simple to operate and less costly. As soon as you talk about non-geostationary, you actually have to deploy an infrastructure on Earth that is more complicated, simply because your antennas have to track the satellites flying over. The geostationary, they are fixed. Your antenna is very simple. It moves with the Earth. So geostationary is still something extremely important. But our intention is actually to play both GSO and non-GSO, because the beauty of non-GSO, is actually to do something, and I'm going a bit quick here, is actually to do some things which GSO are less good at. And I'm talking about being quicker, the question of latency, and also high throughput. With our mPower system, our MIO O3B mPower system, we can now provide 500 megabits per second to points of presence, and we can go up to 1 gigabit per second. Our customers are governments and enterprises. Think about it. But they need that level of connectivity. One element which I haven't mentioned so far is cybersecurity. You heard from Natalia before. We are a member of GSOA. She talked about resilience. Cybersecurity is super important. There is a session here in this place dedicated to the NIS2 directive, which becomes a game changer in terms of regulation. We need absolutely to be vigilant on cybersecurity. That becomes a top priority. There is a way to do something extraordinary with space, which is quantum key distribution. So it's using the quantum technology to actually secure the links to match what the quantum computers will be able to do. If we are not vigilant, the quantum computers very soon are going to be able to break any cryptographic keys. So how do you manage that? You use quantum key distribution. We are part of EuroQCI as a company, and actually we are a leader in the Eagle-1 program, which is joint between the European Space Agency and the European Commission. And this one is going to lead to an in-orbit testing in 2026 using a LEO satellite. So you see, we're getting now slightly into LEO ourselves. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, IRIS². It's a big program that has been launched several years ago. We are part of the consortium SpaceRISE, together with Airbus, Thales, EUTELSAT, Hispasat, and many others. We are now in a tendering phase. We are providing an offer to the European Commission to operate a multi-constellation system, a multi-orbit architecture satellite system. It's quite confidential. I cannot disclose a lot, but let's be clear that our intention is really to contribute very much to this system and to use, hopefully, our MIO O3B system to give it a start, right? And this IRIS² system has super high ambition. Do you see all the many different use cases we need to match? This is extremely ambitious. It's going to be very expensive, and our technology needs to be innovative and scalable to meet this. The services are supposed to start between 2028 and 2030. So watch over, and soon, hopefully, we will announce what's going on next. I'd like to finish my presentation with one very interesting example. It's something which we have demonstrated with NASA and Planet, the company that provides the pictures for Google Earth. We are doing now, thanks to our multi-constellation system, we're providing inter-satellite links to NASA and Planet so they can relay, they can actually get all the data from Earth observation back to us instantly, without waiting that the LEO satellites or the MEO satellites goes back and make the revolution. How? Simply because our LEO MEO satellites go send their signals to the GEO, and the GEO send it back immediately to Earth. So you see, this is a beautiful application of a combination of MEO and GEO. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cecile. I am sure we will have questions for you, so thank you for your presentation. And I would like to encourage our ladies and gentlemen who are joining our session online. So we're waiting your questions via Zoom chat. And now it's a time for a question from audience for Cecile subject. Cecile, you are highly experienced, and you talked how rapidly the satellite services evolves. Could you say, predict, not long, but short future, how satellite services will be after 5 years? So your opinion.
This is a super big question, Darius. So I think very clearly one element which Natalia mentioned, and I think Thomas talked about it already, is that you will have an increased convergence between satellite and terrestrial. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And one obvious reason, I mean, there are two obvious reasons. The first is our sector has embarked into innovation at a pace that is absolutely amazing, and that we couldn't predict even 5 years ago. So we're really ramping up. We're getting to a level of connectivity, of throughput or resilience that we didn't have before. Even in geostationary satellites, I mean, they are getting software defined, they are very flexible. So all technology in satellite evolve very rapidly. And the second reason is digital divide, the coverage. I mean, if you look at the figures, how much it would cost to cover the entirety of Europe, for instance, with fiber connectivity. Fiber is state-of-the-art, absolutely no doubt about that. If we could all have fiber, oh, fantastic, we could rely only on fiber. I don't know whether you saw the reports and the numbers. It is just not conceivable. Who's going to pay for that? That is not possible. So we can have that objective, let's say, as a horizon, maybe. But clearly, we need to rely on many different technologies to complement each other, and more can contribute to enable everyone to have access to meaningful connectivity.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Laurent Jaffard, the European Space Agency Director of Connectivity and Secure Communication, and he is the head of European Center for Space Applications and Telecommunications. Mr. Jaffard will present European Space Agency position on future connectivity.
Distinguished guests and distinguished panelists, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person today. My name is Laurent Jaffard. I'm the ESA Director for Connectivity and Secure Communication, and I will talk about future connectivity game changers as seen by the European Space Agency. So the first one is the mobile convergence towards direct-to-device, and we are going to move towards a seamless connectivity with the unification of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. This is going to be based on 3GPP standards for 5G and 6G, a paradigm shift with direct connectivity from satellites to standard devices. But this will also have a large impact on mobility business sectors such as the automotive, the aviation, and the maritime. The next one is going to be on industry competitiveness. We see that the evolution towards multi-orbit software-defined infrastructure is going to be key and lasting. This will have an impact on space technology, ground technology, network orchestration, but also on the manufacturing side. The emergence of more and more constellation will lead to mass manufacturing and therefore design to manufacture rather than design to performance. On the spectrum side, spectrum is a scarce resource that is becoming congested and affected by interferences. Critical services are at risk due to the congestion and interferences. Space capability are needed to geolocate the RF interference, and this will involve national and international spectrum authorities. And now, governmental connectivity. IRIS² is central in Europe around governmental connectivity, ArtGov, LightGov, with the European Commission. This will evolve and expand into a multi-generational capability and infrastructure. It will be a system of systems combining other space domains to effectively respond, for example, to natural disasters and other crises. The next game changer is going to be interplanetary connectivity towards standards-based communication infrastructure to support telecom activities and navigation activities for space exploration and science. There will be a first step or first stop on the moon, and the question of data relay using optical technology to Earth orbit will be key. And finally, quantum technologies and quantum networking. So quantum technologies are transformational. Quantum communication networks are emerging. Metropolitan quantum key distribution, QKD networks, are connecting banks, critical infrastructure, institutions, and by 2040, quantum information networks will interconnect quantum computers, clocks, and sensors to enhance their capabilities. Satellites are the only means to provide quantum connectivity over large distances, and therefore the space infrastructure will be key in this quantum information networks. That's it. I wish you a great conference, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you sometime soon.
Okay, thank you for Mr. Laurent. Mr. Alex Epstein, head of International DRC Spectrum Strategy for Amazon's Project Cooper, will be presented by Mr. Alex, and during the presentation we will see Amazon ambitions for future connectivity. Alex, it's a big pleasure. Do you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you, we see you. Alex, the floor is yours.
Okay, very good. Can I confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we see. Good. You can make it bigger.
Okay, does that work?
That's good.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for having me at this event. My apologies that I was not able to attend in person, but it's a great pleasure to speak to everyone. My name is Alex Epstein, as mentioned, and I am leading Project Kuiper's efforts for the WRC agenda and also the technical work at ITR. So what is Amazon's Project Kuiper? It is our initiative to increase global broadband access through a constellation of satellites in low Earth orbit. Our primary mission is to deliver fast, affordable broadband to unserved and underserved communities all over the world. And we know that this is an initiative that is greatly needed around the world. This is a great need for society to bring connections to the unserved and underserved communities all over the world. And we know that, unfortunately, this is a big problem that we are facing, bridging the digital divide, as there are billions of people on Earth that currently do not have reliable internet access. They do not have access at all, or they do not have internet access that essentially conforms to broadband standards. So this chart just essentially indicates how much broadband access is lacking all over the world. And unfortunately, this is a very big problem that we are facing, and one that Amazon and our Project Kuiper, Kuiper Low Earth Orbit Constellation is trying to tackle and address this issue. So I mentioned a little bit of overview of our mission, but what exactly is Kuiper? It's built around the Kuiper system. It's a truly global network where we will deploy satellites in low Earth orbit, 590 kilometers, 610, and 630 kilometers at various altitudes and inclinations, allowing us to deliver high-speed service to anywhere essentially around the globe. We will have scale. We will have thousands of satellites in low Earth orbits. We will have gateways, and we will have, the Amazon machine with global networking and internet providers all over the world to be able to connect those that do not currently have connections. And what our impact? We are trying to, again, bring affordable broadband to communities, households, businesses all over the world, those that need it. So this slide essentially gives an overview of our planned customers: residential, small businesses, public service, enterprise and transportation, emergency and telecommunication services. Those are just some of the customer base that we plan on having with our project or our program. These are our customer terminals that we will deploy when we initiate our service. This was just released to the public last year. So as you can see here, we have 3 customer terminals here, a very small antenna that's capable of 100 megabits per second. So it's 7 inches by 7 inches or 18 centimeters by 18 centimeters. So if you think about that of a very small tablet, it's roughly that size. A medium-sized antenna that's really your household antenna that will be able to provide broadband to a house, capable of 400 megabits per second, and then a larger antenna that's more for enterprise uses of 1 gigabytes per second download. So what is our timeline? In 2022, we procured the largest launch contract in history with Arianespace, ULA, and Blue Origin. And essentially, we bought enough rocket space to be able to launch our constellations. This last year, we have launched and successfully operated, and we have blown through all of the major milestones we had for our prototype KuiperSat-1 and Kuiper-2 satellites. And then later this year, we will commence our full production and launches of our production satellites. And then in 2026, we forecast that 50% of our constellation will be operational. So, of course, having a great satellite system is very important to being able to provide connectivity. As others have mentioned before me, satellite systems are really great at being able to provide connectivity anytime and anywhere across the world. But really, achieving universal access to broadband will really necessitates a very good spectrum and regulatory environment. And that is because to truly bridge the digital divide and connect as many folks as possible, we really need satellite capacity and access to spectrum. And that's really only attainable by a predictable and enabling regulatory environment for all technologies. And obviously, as we go through this, protection of services while ensuring spectrum efficiency is essential to meet universal goals to increase connectivity. So the way I always like to approach regulations for systems like Kuiper is that we're really playing catch up in the low Earth orbit, especially for commercial satellite services. It's really something that regulations were developed a long time ago, some 20, 25 years ago, and then there's really a lot of the companies that were enabling in, let's say, the late 1990s, early 2000s, really never really took off. So a lot of regulations and spectrum policy for systems like NGSO systems have really only started to be active again, I would say, within the last 5 years or so, is really playing catch up and developing regulations. So one of the aspects that is most being discussed at the ITUR, and also very, I'm sure folks know if you participate in WRC 23, one of the main regulatory issues related to satellite systems like Kuiper and non-geostationary satellite systems are EPFD limits. And there's a number of international and country by country regulations related to EPFD limits, and it's really regulations that govern how satellite systems, how NGSO satellite systems share with geostationary satellite systems. And the regulations that were developed 25 years ago really limit the capacity and really limit the full potential of non-geostationary satellite services. So WRC 27 invited technical studies on these limits, and that is something that Kuiper we are actively involved in and actively being discussed at Working Party 4A and also in other forums around the world. And we just invite participation in these regulatory studies. We do believe that there's an opportunity here for a win-win situation to redefine, not redefine, but ensure that existing services are protected, but really enhance spectral efficiency and spectrum services so that non-geostationary systems like Kuiper and other services, as are being discussed by other panelists, are able really to fully take advantage of our system and capacity and provide broadband to as many people as possible with the additional capacity that's coming online of our systems. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention and welcome any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for your presentation, and congratulations from our side for successfully developing Kuiper project. So, yes, we have questions on site from audience.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say that I am not completely aware of the current state of the technology, but for what I understand, Starlink has an ongoing similar project. So how would Project Kuiper plan to outperform the Starlink constellation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So the short answer is that there's enough capacity and enough demand out there in the world that we need as many constellations as possible in order to provide the capacity and the coverage to bridge the digital divide. So I always like to say that if every single constellation was successful, that is being planned and being envisioned, there would still be a gap in the digital divide. So we need Kuiper, we need Starlink, we need the geostationary satellite services, and we really need spectral efficiency for all of these services to operate as well as possible in order to bridge the digital divide. And that's the ultimate goal, to have enough capacity out there in order to bridge the digital divide and connect as many folks as possible. And we really need all of these satellite systems in order to do that. The market and the demand is enough to have both constellations.
And Alex, could you specify about the timeline Kuiper services in Europe and in our region, Baltic region?
Yeah, thank you very much. So obviously, we will launch 50% of the constellation by 2026, and we're launching the first phase this year with customer trials beginning. So we anticipate that we will roll out services worldwide as coverage is available. I can't get into very specifics with you in this forum, but as imagined, 50% of the constellation by 2026 will be enough to provide global coverage.
Okay, that's promising. Thank you very much. Mr. David Goldman, the Vice President of Satellite Policy at SpaceX. David leads global spectrum and broadband policy issues for SpaceX. Direct-to-cell technology is a real game changer, and let me see how it could extend mobile networks. David, warm welcome to our session. Thank you for joining us despite big time difference between Lithuania and United States. Do you hear us? Yeah, I see you.
I do. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you good. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I also have some slides here, so I'm going to try to share them real quick. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Again, really appreciate you having me. My name is David Goldman. I work at SpaceX on Starlink. I wanted to really quickly talk about Starlink and what we're doing, and also talk about our direct-to-device system. So Starlink, SpaceX is started out as a broadband company, or as a rocket company, sorry, starting in 2002. We have a fleet of different rockets that we use that are all reusable, where we have been able to dramatically lower the cost of launch and accelerate the pace of launch to be able to make space more accessible. We've been using that capability to be able to launch our own Starlink NGSO system, that we currently have launched over 6,500 satellites, over 150 Starlink missions, and we have a little over 3 million customers globally now on the system. And just last week, we actually passed 100 different markets that we're in worldwide. Our system is right now capable of averaging about 100 megabits download speeds to customers, and we're averaging approximately a little under 30 milliseconds latency. So that's about equivalent to what you get on most terrestrial systems. So people have been able to use that capability in a number of ways. What you can see here is several different use cases that people have been able to deploy Starlink and connect. And really what you can see when you have a system like this is that you don't need the ground infrastructure to be able to, you don't need an immediate ground infrastructure to be able to provide service. So what that means is that we can move in and provide telehealth in places where they don't have strong broadband infrastructure. We can connect schools in places that had never had that capability before. For example, the picture that you see in the upper right there, that's off of an island off the coast of South America, that those were schools that have no other option for broadband. And because they've been able to get that connection, they now have urban quality broadband for all the students, when prior to Starlink, they had no options. In the bottom left, what you're actually seeing is that's hundreds of kilometers out in the ocean. That is a demo of rescuing what would happen if you had to rescue astronauts out in the ocean on a drone ship. That is bringing high-speed internet to that ship, the rescue ship, in the event that there was something out at sea. And similarly, in the bottom right, what you're seeing is out in the mountains, actually, where it was too expensive to be able to deploy traditional broadband. We were able to bring broadband in immediately after a mine disaster. So we're now using that same capability, that same launch cadence, and the same basic model of satellite to add new antennas to it to be able to now to communicate straight from the satellites to wireless devices like your cell phones. So we've launched over the past several months now, we're over 60 satellites. And what this can do is it can allow your cell phone talk straight to a satellite anywhere in the world. So essentially no more white zones, no more dead zones for your phones. Now, to be very clear, initially, this is going to be a text-only service. We hope by next year to have voice, and then eventually to have higher speed data. But we partner with terrestrial operators in a country to be able to use their spectrum to be able to connect a device and be able to extend that device's range outside of the footprint of the terrestrial network. We've been moving at a very fast cadence since we got our initial approvals to be able to launch the system. What you can see on the far left is our stack of satellites that included our first set of direct-to-device satellites. That was just this past December. That's what in this past December is when we first integrated those satellites into the rocket. By January 2nd, we launched those satellites. And by January 8th, we had our first text over satellite. What you can see there may be the longest distance a text message ever traveled to go nowhere. From one phone to the next, it went up 500, actually probably 350 kilometers up to space, and came back and sent the message to the phone right next door. Since then, we've been sending numerous text messages and trying out different capabilities. We've actually even gotten video to play over the system, and we've begun our regular cadence of launching. So at this point, we're going essentially every few days with new satellites that have this capability. And as I mentioned, we have about a little over 60 satellites up in orbit now, and we have another launch this week. The way that it works is actually is very similar to what you would see with our traditional Starlink system. The difference would be is on the right-hand side with traditional Starlink system, we would have a user terminal antenna that can talk to our satellites that brings it then back down into the regular network. In this case, we use an unmodified cell phone. So if you're a subscriber to one of our partners, the cell phone in your pocket will work with the system immediately. It will be able to talk up to those satellites, which will then bring down the signal back into our network and back into our partner's network. And so from a user perspective, everything will look exactly the same. So the US FCC passed the first regulatory framework for a direct-to-cell service just a few months ago. It essentially tracks the way that the model that we've been using, which is to have that a satellite operator would have a partner that's has a terrestrial license, and that you could then use that terrestrial license and use that spectrum to be able to connect to the satellites. This is after the FCC has adopted its rules. We're seeing this in a number of countries around the world that are now considering their own rules and looking at similar approaches. And at the World Radio Conference for 2027, this has been teed up as an agenda item to be considered to harmonize the rules around the world. So within Europe, this should not be an extremely difficult lift for local regulators. We believe that existing regulatory frameworks can encompass direct-to-cell, that this is a capability that builds on to the existing terrestrial license. When a terrestrial operator has a license, that they should be able to use that license to then add on the direct-to-cell capability. And by adopting that sort of approach, that more flexible approach, what you can see is a much more rapid deployment of our system of a direct-to-cell services within your country. So our system is being deployed as we speak as a global system. So the coverage should be everywhere in the world within the next few months. So once that happens, it becomes a question of just regulatory approvals to be able to turn on the service anywhere in the world. And what we're hopeful for, and what we've been working with a number of European countries to do, is to try to have a harmonized approach across all the countries, so that way we can ensure that we're considering and taking care of any cross-border interference issues. So I believe that's it for me. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your presentation. That we see clearly that SpaceX and Starlink is the global leading companies in direct-to-cell, direct-to-device technology. And yeah, it looks and it sounds like really promising and bridging the gaps of connectivity. So, dear colleagues, we have time for questions about direct-to-device technology. David, could you a little bit explore more how European Union looks like with direct-to-device technology comparing to another continents? What would be the main factors to successful deployment of direct-to-device technology in Europe?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as an initial matter, as I mentioned, once we begin deployment, or once we complete our deployment, which we're hoping to have essentially enough satellites to have service by this fall. Once we have that, we actually have the capability of offering service anywhere across Europe. what we would need is in any given country, we would need a terrestrial partner to work with. And so we're actively talking to a number of companies that might be interested. And then we would need regulatory approval. I think one of the issues that we have to consider, and we're aware of, that I don't know is unique to Europe, but it certainly is a challenge, is making sure that you don't get cross-border interference issues. So we're very conscious of that, and we have been working with both regulators and our own engineers to make sure that we can handle that. I think we believe that that can be taken care of without too much of a problem. And so from our perspective, it's just a question of having partners and getting the regulatory approvals, and we're ready to go.
Okay, so as we see the same interference with other countries in Europe, maybe it's the biggest challenge for direct-to-device technologies. So from your answer, we understood that this is possible to solve. Yeah.
Yeah, we think we have a solution to that. We know that that is a concern. We have ways of being able to basically taper the power levels as we get closer to the border, so that by the time the power gets to the other side of a border, it essentially looks the same as a terrestrial system.
Okay. Yes, we still have questions.
Thank you. Maybe a quick one in terms of, you mentioned 7 countries which you will have on the rollout plan in the immediate future. Maybe you could give us a bit more color in terms of your own priorities, where you want the services to land first, who are on the, if you disclose, who are on the path, and who are those terrestrial partners that you're bringing on board, and when can we expect to have your services here?
Well, our first partner that we signed up was with T-Mobile in the United States. So we expect to have our service ready in the fall with T-Mobile. We also have partners in Australia and Japan. I think in several, I'm trying to remember if we have on every continent. We might have partners on maybe 4 continents now. So but we don't have a priority of certain countries that we're favoring over others. It really is a question of how quickly we can find partners and getting the approvals in those countries.
Okay, David, we still have one question from our online audience. How this technology will work with IoT devices, and what network technology will be behind?
So we could use either our regular traditional Starlink service or our IoT or our direct-to-device technology to be able to connect IoT devices, depending on the situation. So the direct-to-device service, again, in any individual country, would work with our partner spectrum. So any device that already has antennas that can work on the spectrum for which we're licensed, we can, without any modification to the device, should be able to talk to it. But if there's, depending on the capabilities, you could also use our standard Starlink service to be able to connect the IoT devices as well. It may take some integration, but we do that fairly regularly.
Okay, that's it. Once again, thank you very much, David, for your presentation and answers.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Andrius Šemeškevičius, he is the head of technology at Telia Lietuva, a Lithuanian mobile operator. Andrius brings extensive experience in the technology sector, has a profound expertise and a reputation as a telco Wikipedia. Andrius will present Telia's success and ambitions for future connectivity. Andrius, we're very happy that you join us today. Please, the floor is yours. Do you hear us?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
Yes, we hear you, we see the slides.
Great. So I was planning to be on site today, but unfortunately I got this old known disease called COVID, but still alive. So we'll talk about connectivity and connectivity more on the ground, not in the satellite in the space. And when you look to our consumers, when you talk to the consumers, what do they want actually from the connectivity? And majority will tell that I want more speed, or as we say, bandwidth. They want to use it everywhere, no matter where I'm sitting or working. Is it a train, car? Is it summer house somewhere, or even cellar at home? I want to have connectivity and to be connected. Then, of course, everybody wants to have a reliable and resilient networks. No matter weather conditions, no matter if there is a failure of electricity grid, you want to be able to call and be called. Unfortunately, that's probably specific for Lithuania. Like, looks like it's under the spell. They want it cheap. So our consumers really want the cheap connectivity. They don't want to pay any premium for all these things, what I mentioned. If you look to the telco operators and how the telco operators are responding to the market needs, and Telia is the largest integrated operator in Lithuania, so we have a fixed mobile network as well as IT services. So I'm talking from position of Telia. And of course, the first thing is fixed internet. We have to deploy a fiber network, and Telia is known that it started deploying fiber networks over 10 years ago. And our population, of course, is rather small. But if you take the dwelling units, we can see that we have approximately 1.5 million dwelling units. Majority of them have fiber connectivity. So if you want to use at home, you can be connected. And if I add up VDSL or super VDSL links, which are capable of running a network over 100 megabits, we calculate that over 80% of Lithuanian households can already use fast internet at home. And then if you have a fast connectivity to your home, it's not enough. With the fiber deployment, many operators started to deploy point-to-point, or another competitive technology was GPON, Gigabit Passive Optical Network. Telia did the same, but after some time we realized that we need to think about the future, so we started to deploy XGS-PON. That is 10 gigabit symmetrical GPON technology that allows up to 10 gigabits download and up to 10 gigabits uplink for the end user. And here is just a screenshot from my computer that we tested on non-modified network, just providing 10 gigabit access. Another thing that is important if you want a good and reliable internet at home is Wi-Fi. So for Wi-Fi, of course, Wi-Fi 6 and upcoming Wi-Fi 7, upcoming because we didn't introduce it yet in our network, but Wi-Fi 6 is already there for several years. So again, you can get maximum out of your fixed connectivity. And here you can see that even the smartphone was able to reach over 900 megabits per second on both on downlink and uplink. Also, once you are well connected, if you have a well-connected apartment or home, it's very important to secure that you have a good connectivity in all the rooms, in all the premises you are willing to have it. In many cases, that's apartment on the left. The provider deploys the fiber, deploys the router, but then it's only one room in your apartment that has decent connectivity, while the others are not so performing well. The Wi-Fi mesh network, you can deploy multiple devices, and it's a smart mesh solution. No interference between devices means that you extend your connectivity beyond one room. You extend your connectivity towards the entire office or entire home. Moving from fixed to the mobile networks. So Telia Lithuania launched 5G, commercial 5G, on the same day when the license was issued, when the commercial license was issued. And by turning on 5G, we covered 80% of Lithuanian population. and 65% of territory. Then we continued our network modernization program, which ended in summer 23. And by summer 23, we reached 97% of territory of Lithuania. So I think it's one of the fastest countries with 5G deployment in the world, that in such a short time frame we managed to achieve such good results. The journey was not easy, but we managed. Also, we launched 5G fixed wireless access product for the locations where you don't have a fixed internet or where you don't have a fiber or a very good quality copper. So it's substitution of a fiber, you can say, in a way, and you can also use smart Wi-Fi network to extend your connectivity beyond one room. That is working well until something extraordinary happens. This picture was taken in North Lithuania on April 22nd this year. It was 2 days with heavy snow, and that area was without electricity for a couple of days until the electricity operator restored the energy supply. And here comes the interesting fact about fixed network, because fixed network has certain advantages compared to the mobile network. Because in those situations, normally the fixed network is alive, because the fixed network nodes usually they have large capacity batteries and diesel generators. So the operators are providing fiber connectivity to your home or office. The only thing what the offices or home needs is uninterruptible power supply and generator. If you have a Wi-Fi connected to it, then you have all the connectivity. So you can work with mobile computer. You can also make calls and receive calls using mobile phone, because voice over Wi-Fi works in any case. Another thing what we did to improve our resiliency and reliability is an elimination of so-called chains in mobile backhaul. On the upper part, you see the traditional mobile network grid, where one base station is connected via fiber, and then in the chain the remaining base stations are connected using radio links. In the lower part, it's how Telia is building the network. We built already over 90% of our base stations with fiber connectivity. So we don't use those long chains, and only in extreme rare situations we have like one base station feeding connectivity to several in a chain. That allows us to avoid situations like I mentioned, electricity blackout, some interruption. And for home offices or offices, we also recommend to use diversification, meaning that even if you have a very decent fiber, it's always recommended, if you are very dependent on connectivity, to use additional or alternative connectivity like fixed wireless access, or even LEO satellite that was discussed today many times. And how to make the connectivity cheaper, or how to be more sustainable. This graph is from our network, where you can see how much electricity is consumed by 1 terabyte transmitted. And we can see the pattern that amount of terabytes more than doubled in a year, while electricity consumption per terabyte is decreasing. So 5G is helping us to be more green, and 5G is helping us to ship more data with less energy. So to summarize, our response to the market is that fiber is a key, of course, then 5G rollout, then we go into the premises that you need to have a decent GPON or XGS-PON connectivity, then Wi-Fi 6 or 7, and energy-saving initiatives. And the last slide from me, what is the future of connectivity? I believe that the focus is now shifting towards reliability and resilience. We less talking about the speed, and in the previous presentation, nobody was talking about bandwidth or capacity or speed. That's more or less solved. Then, of course, the 5G, and we need to increase the density of a network grid, energy efficiency, that's very important factor, and seamless hybrid connectivity. What I showed in extreme situations, one technology is complementing another. So there is no single technology that fulfills all the needs, but if we combine all the technologies, we have a really future-proof connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrews, for your presentation and for the achievements of Telia you presented today in our panel session. Now it's time for questions. Do we have here in audience? Andrews, yeah. We can bring the microphone.
The mic.
Yeah.
All right. So we saw on your slides that what the users want, very interesting information, and it seems that majority of users use the Wi-Fi at home, which is currently a limiting factor with regards to the speeds. My question was, what is the driver then to invest in XGS-PON for the 10 gigabit connectivity?
Okay,
why
thank
do
you for your question.
Yep.
Yeah, so the traditional GPON is, GPON in general, the technology is shared media. So the total uplink for the GPON technology is little bit over 1 gigabit. So if you have 50 users, for example, doing some uploads, then the total uplink capacity would be limited. With XGS-PON, you actually have download 10 and uplink 10 as well. So then there is no limitation. And what we see in the patterns, that users started to use more uplink than previously. If a downloaded amount of data is growing, you can say twice per year, then uploaded amount of data is growing probably 5-10 times per year. So therefore, we obviously started to think, what do we need to do to improve the uplink capabilities? So this XGS-PON is just for improving uplink capabilities, not putting any limits on the network side, so to say.
Andrews, we appreciate the requirements from the customers, a bit of the technical capabilities on the networks and on the technologies that you expect to deploy. The question is, in terms of Telia Lithuania, what of those technologies do you expect to evolve into the market in the next few years, and where's the technology impact that the customers, the consumers will feel? What's the next big bang of the 5G, because that becomes a bit of a story of the past?
Yeah, it's very hard to predict, As I said, consumers, they want a reliable network, super fast network, and very cheap network. And only use cases may be related to AI, might be something new that consumer will realize that, he needs a lower latency or so, because Lithuania, if I talk about Lithuania, there are not so many gamers playing, for example, on Wi-Fi or on mobile connectivity. They always try to play on the media that has the lowest latency. So, for example, latency is a key for some use cases, but from our consumers, the pressure is more on the bandwidth. So I don't know. It's very hard to predict, and I think those low Earth orbit satellites, what we discussed, is for the cases where some area of Lithuania is completely without electricity, and there is no network. So the only way to communicate would be via satellite. So these are my thoughts.
Okay, so Andrews, the last question from our side to you. Yeah, we heard your successful story with Telia was the leading company in Lithuania in the rollout of 5G technology, but the stats show in Lithuania that consumers use just 2% of 1 gigabit per second high-speed quality. So it's also a question related with prediction, But when we will see in Lithuania the real leap into 5G and high-speed internet throughout the country?
I think we're already seeing it, but it's like boiling the frog. You know, when I look to the statistics every month, I see that every month we see plus 2 percentage points increase of 5G data consumption. Is it a lot? I think yes. Today we are consuming in our network 26% of the total mobile data goes using 5G. And that's an enormous result compared to 4G introduction, for example, that was more than 10 years ago. So the progress and it's very visible, but when you sit in the telecommunications business, in this ecosystem, those 2% every month, it seems like very slow. But in reality, I think the pace is very impressive and total amount of mobile data is growing a lot. And you know, what should drive the data consumption overall? We're still waiting for those, you know, augmented reality use cases that, you know, every average citizen will start using it. Today, we're using mobile phone as a main device. And yeah, it's video. So video 4K starts to use more data, but you know, it's not an explosion yet. So I don't know what are the upcoming use cases that the data explosion will happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Many applause to Andrew. Andrew, appreciate your contribution for our session. We wish you good health and see you next time. And Mr. Dalius Butvitis, Senior Managing Director in FTI Capital Advisors. He's a financial and strategic advisor to the leading telcos and investors in Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Dalius says he can talk about telcos for hours, as it is his particular interest. Dalius, please welcome on the stage. We're really extremely excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate to be here. So as Darius was saying, I'm coming a bit from the advisory angle, and in a sense, my profile is different to the profiles of people you may have seen before. Being an advisor to investors, to telecom operators, to financiers, to the governments, I have the excuse of being kind of a consultant. And in consulting, people are allowed to use selective statistics, which means, you know, I don't need to paint the picture really in true colors that it is. I come here to give you a bit of enthusiastic thoughts about telecom, about future, and I'll give you a bit more of a sort of positive picture of where I see and the things that I see. Some of the things that you heard already from my colleagues will be there, and I'll try to cover this real quick and have as many questions from you as well. How do we move this? Next. All right. So my main theme is that the future, in a bit of a difference from the past, is becoming a bit of a symbiotic coexistence of consumers, operators, investors, and to a degree, the regulatory bodies have to be the glue in the middle of those three. We may have come from a history where, you know, telecom operators were charging us $3 per minute, and we were happy to call. That's no longer the case. We still pay quite a bit for roaming on data networks. That's still very expensive outside of Europe, probably, but that's still kind of disbalance towards the operators. There's another extreme where, you know, Andrews, you just heard him say, oh, but the consumers want the lower price. That's what we want, you know. So there's a push from the consumers to go down in price. That also has a limit. You know, once the prices are too low, the ecosystem of operators, consumers, and investors stops to work. So my thesis here is that the future is about coexistence between these three, among these three, and without the right regulatory and government stimulus, that future is probably a bit more challenging to achieve than before. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the consumer perspective, which is here on the screen. And the consumers, as you can imagine yourselves, more and more we get into that digital lifestyle, more and more of physical things we bring back into digital realities. It has a positive, we become more efficient. We can order food online, we can use taxis easier, we can do all sorts of stuff, we can do gaming with low latency. It also has a negative. The average consumer in US, the average teenager in US is spending 7+ hours on digital devices every day. That's a bit of a concern. That's the future. I'll give you a bit of a perspective on the consumers. Next, I'll talk a little bit about network operators. Consumer wants the lower prices. The network operator has a challenge to provide the service, to give them the quality, to ensure that the infrastructure is working, not only for consumers as individuals, for businesses as well, for enabling the economies, for enabling the government. So I'll give a bit of the deep dive into network operators and their life. Investors, obviously there's investors behind every business. These people do have a say, and increasingly high say, increasingly impactful say on the telco operators. You hear things like ESG, you hear things like equality, you hear things like digitization across the world. Investors are behind that, and what becomes clear more and more is that globally, without investor support, without actually bringing these people on board, the industry is not going to be a very happy place as much as we see it. And I'll give a short perspective, again, a very kind of biased and selective statistics of how small nations can make a big impact. So that's probably at the end. Consumer perspective, and I liked what Andrews was saying about, we want more bandwidth, we want more data. What you see here on the screen is a research done by a research house called Omnia. They place all of these different markets in terms of how much growth they see in the next 5 years, in terms of percentage growth year on year, and in terms of absolute growth. The big focus here is that mobile data is the biggest bubble. That's very easy to pick up. So mobile data will continue to grow. It's probably the biggest consumer required service nowadays. It's just gonna, go over and take over some of those smaller things. You see that things like SVOD, online video, fixed broadband, smart home services for homes. These are the things that, from the consumption, from the demand perspective, we're going to see growing, and that's going to be really things that drive the industry quite a lot afterwards. It ties back to the messages which you heard, which means that infrastructure-wise, telco operators need to be sure that all of those base stations are giving us 5G, 6G, 7G, or whatever. Fixed networks-wise, we have the necessary fixed and fiber networks which allow everyone to use those services. What is also interesting is that sort of all of those digital services like the gaming, the digital music, perhaps pay TV to a degree, these things are still smaller. They are quite big contributors to the growth, but we talk about them a lot. It's sort of industry-wise, it's not the biggest thing in the pie. Households-wise, so families, where do we spend money? The chart, again, from the same people in Omdia, kind of reconfirms that on the family size, we're going to continue spending a lot on mobile data. We want more home services. What is home service? This is related to home security. This is related to connected appliances. I'm still asking my wife to connect our fridge to Wi-Fi so that we can order from online. Doesn't work yet, but hopefully it's going to come in the near future. Now, the other thing which prompted me to have this chart here is that to say that, look, all the voice services, both, well, obviously fixed and mobile to a degree, and the legacy services, demand for those things is going to go down. The markets will go down. So naturally, the natural evolution of those services is going to be towards the end, and it's going to be replaced with all the different digital things. Now, what's not on the chart, and it's kind of important, is that one, we're going to be spending more and more on these services because they become more and more ingrained into our life. So the growth of spend is 9% year on year in the next 5 years. So the research suggests that people will spend almost 10% more every year on these things. Why do they do it, and why are we so happy to do it? It's because we get more and more digitized vis-a-vis physical. More and more we're happy to get that efficiency from technologies with both positive and negative consequences, and sort of bring that physical into digital. The other thing which is not on the chart is that behind all of this, there's infrastructure. We need fiber networks, we need data centers, we need towers, we need healthy operators, and we need healthy investors to make this happen. We want it, we as people, we as consumers, we as businesses, we want it. Someone needs to invest and make it happen. A quick deep dive into the actual consumer requirements, and I wanted to have this chart because it actually says, yes, the next most important thing in what consumers want is the price. And we do want to pay less and less, for the things that we get. So the excitement of digital services, this sort of a reducing marginal utility to the digital services we attach, and we do want prices to go down. But nevertheless, the quality of the connectivity, and that's what Andrews was talking about, the quality is by far number one requirement from sort of people globally. What does that mean? That means that if we need to substitute one for the other, if we need to pay a bit more for a better quality connectivity, we're going to be happy to do it. The other interesting observation here is that sort of the variety of digital services that telcos provide is not so important for people. They do want to get, Uber apps, music apps, video apps, and whatever. But when it comes to requirement for that, people don't feel that it's of the utmost importance. Why does that happen? It's just because people feel that this is available through multiple channels. You don't necessarily need to go to Telia Lithuania to get every digital app. You can do that on your iPhone. You can do that on your Google App Store and whatever else. And now the other thing is that therein lies a bit of a dilemma, because if we go this route and we do really make everyone so happy with low prices for services, that's not good. It's not good for telco operators. The telco operators have gone through a bit of a downward industry crisis type of period in between probably 2010, 2017, where they're kind of getting back to it now. But constant decrease and push for reduction of prices beyond the sort of the reasonable level is not good for the industry. We want the utility, we want to have the good services, we want the quality, we should be ready to pay for it a reasonable amount of money. I'll jump into operator perspective. What I wanted to show here is you have sort of a bunch of different telco operators here on the chart. What it says is the higher in the chart an operator is, the more they invest into the future technologies. The more on the right of the chart the operator is, the more they do it in-house themselves rather than rely on a partner network. What's very clear is that in the future, the industry cannot survive on self-sustained basis. The industry will not be working on a telco does everything basis. What has to happen is that what we thought that it's kind of a one-man show of an operator to do everything from having the towers up to providing a digital services, that doesn't work anymore. So you would expect that people move towards partnership models. People find the commercial ways to work together. Telcos become the enablers. Telcos provide the infrastructure. They enable other people, but they don't necessarily want to do everything themselves. Some of these telcos kind of already are realizing that this is the future, this is the way for us to work. Some of them are still sort of, in the legacy space of we do it all in-house and we only rely on ourselves, probably because we like the quality of work, we can trust ourselves, we don't necessarily trust someone else. The other thing is that what's a bit surprising, that you think investments in telco space are not that high. Actually, people invest a lot. People invest a lot. They do realize that both infrastructure and the services need extra investment, and that's happening. Now, we spoke a bit, us as consumers, we spoke a bit about the telco operators. What do investors think? Now, what we do here is we look at sort of top 20 telcos in the world, both the developed market telcos and sort of a bit more emerging market telcos. And we look at how their market capitalization evolves through years. So the blue line is the emerging telcos, the dark blue line is the developed market telcos, and the green is the S&P. I look at this and I'm like, no, I'm not happy, you know. If I was an investor and I invested to get a negative 1.4% return over the last 2.5 years, I wouldn't be happy at all. Emerging markets probably are performing a bit better, but for a reason, because they do tend to take bigger risks and they do tend to grow a bit more on the smaller base. All that says is that those big institutional investors, they oftentimes start to jump from here to here. And if you think what the constituents of S&P and of the largest market cap companies are, these are all, you know, the nowadays tech giants in essence. So if someone is an investor in a telecom company and they don't necessarily see the returns and see the management performing as they like, with the development of the technologies in industry, people start jumping from telco into technology, and we cannot blame them. If someone can make better returns on investing in you know, Apple, Microsoft, Google, or whatever, that's their choice, and that's what the institutional investors are doing. Now, not to give you a very pessimistic picture, the telcos are coming up. The telcos are in the mode of realizing what the future models are, where the services are, where the cash flow growth is, and what's the model which allows investors to be happy again. Happy again because they were happy before 2010, you know, broadly speaking. They were not so happy in between 2010 and 2020, and now, you know, the industry is shifting towards finding that recipe to get the returns to the investors. Valuations. I do tend to speak about, so this is the EV/EBITDA multiple. So most of the telcos globally, well, at least the picked traded ones, investors trade at 4.5 to 8 times EBITDA. That means that they will pay 8 times the EBITDA of the last 12 months for a sort of a well-performing telco, and that's a fair price. What I was comparing it to is the return on investment that the telcos make. So how much extra cash a telco delivers on the capital employed. And I was looking at that and I'm like, there's no correlation in that whatsoever. You know, there's any statistical reference between the prices that investors pay and the actual performance of the business. It's like completely unrelated. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And the one way probably to explain this is that industry is in a bit of a shift mode. So this is a catch picture at the end of 23 or sort of mid 24. Some of those higher priced telcos, you know, you take Swisscom, you take KDDI, you take Verizon. Well, to a degree, I'm coming a bit with a Middle Eastern hat, so I want to say praise STC, Saudi Telecom as well. They do invest to build for the future. They do invest in infrastructure, they do invest in services. So what we're getting here is that, yeah, maybe, you know, the returns or the prices are a bit high. The returns are probably subpar in here and relative to the rest of the industries. But the future, if we come here in 2 years and we see how these better performing telcos have performed, you will see that they will have delivered money to the investors. Mergers and acquisitions. Do investors want to allow the management teams to buy and build? Yes, absolutely. There's a few themes, you know, in terms of geographical buying again. So telcos have stopped buying geographically. Now they're coming back to it on a reasonable basis. Swisscom is a good example of that. Iliad, including investing in Ukraine. There's a good amount of infrastructure transactions still happening. So we talked about fiber, we talk about towers, you know, we talk about data centers. This is a big thing. It continues to be a big thing. And aside of that, there's quite a bit of satellite and technology. Let me finish with one thing which I wanted to share with you, and I'm done. So what you heard is consumers, operators, investors let me leave you with a bit of a biased statistics around small countries. Yeah. I want to be able to leave you with the idea that small countries can still punch above their weight. I've had the picture of our national team, because in our national team, I'm keeping the fingers crossed that coming from a small nation with a small GDP on a global level, we can punch above our weight in terms of basketball. The same thing is for telcos, absolutely so. This is a list of, relatively smaller market telcos. This is not China, not US, not Canada, not Australia. But sort of smaller telcos, as much as we can pick them up. Ignore the ones which are in the economies in oil and gas and petrochemicals related, and ignore the ones which have a very clear tax advantage, right? I mean, you want to separate the countries and the telcos which perform super well, and they are originating from small countries. And these people can definitely punch above their weight. What are the sort of the themes that connect these nations? Absolutely, R&D investment. Everyone now talks about the startup ecosystems and the technologies. Absolutely, that's the theme. Digital infra. Thanks God we have Telia, who invested in fiber, and they are continuing, hopefully, to invest in fiber. Digital infra must be there. Without the digital infra, it doesn't work. A supportive wider economy. You see that some of these nations do have a wider industrial services and heavy economy. And skilled workforce, to a high degree, skilled and happy workforce. Workforce is not happy. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. We're not going to be able to deliver. But these are the examples where I could bet and I could say that the nations, the investors, the regulators, the operators, and the consumers, to a degree, have achieved amazing results, despite the fact that they're coming from the size of the markets, which are much smaller than the rest. And I'll close with that. This is not my slide. I kind of copied it from a colleague of mine. But it just says that the telco of the future is a platform for other things to grow. It's not necessarily delivering the whole impact itself. It's a platform of which the rest of the businesses, the rest of the consumers, and the economies take off and give us the bright future that we look for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dalius, thank you very much for your presentation. And I really liked the message that small countries still has the possibility to perform and compete globally. And of course, statistics and analytics you brought for us in this panel, they talk not only about today and reality, but also statistics and analytics could predict the future. So this was one of our goals during this session, and thank you for your
as they say
contribution.
in our country, from my mouth to the ear of the God.
Okay, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are a little bit out of time, but now it's the right moment to see the screen and the results from our audience. What is the opinion of the next game changer in future connectivity? Here we have the questions, and okay, and the results. Here, the first one, artificial intelligence. Quite leading answer. And the next, IoT and Internet of Everything, quantum computing. Yeah. Thank you very much for participating, and I think these answers could be the takeaways of our discussion. And from my side, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all our panelists for their thoughts and to audience for the engagement. So the game changers we discussed today particularly the integration of SATCOMs with mobile infrastructure, expansion of 5, 6G networks with artificial intelligence, herald a future where connectivity is not just utility, but a lifeline to innovation, security, and community. And these advancements promise to bridge the digital divide, enhance global communication, empower societies, global businesses, and empower the elderly lady from the small village where we heard in the opening speech. So thank you very much. Let we be connected for better future.